Would it be fair to say that most people assume burnout comes from working too much? Too many hours, too many responsibilities, too many deadlines? Sometimes that's true. Yet a surprising amount of burnout begins somewhere quieter, inside your own head. Every day your mind produces thousands of thoughts. Some are useful, some are distractions, some are simply noise. And we know that not every thought is helping you. Some quietly work against you, draining mental energy throughout the day without you even realizing it. That's why in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a simple mental shift that can dramatically reduce that kind of mental exhaustion. It takes less than 10 minutes to understand. Once you see it, something important becomes clear. You don't have to believe every thought your brain produces. A surprising amount of stress disappears when you stop treating every thought as important, because much of the mental suffering people experience isn't caused by their circumstances. It's caused by a habit most people never realize they've developed. Think about how most mornings begin. Before the day is fully started, your mind is already active. You may be thinking about unfinished work, something you forgot to do yesterday, maybe a conversation that didn't go the way you expected, or a situation that might go wrong later today. Within milliseconds, your brain is already running through scenarios before the day has even begun. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. Your mind produces a constant stream of thoughts. Most of us assume those thoughts deserve attention simply because they appear. That assumption is where the real problem begins. When every thought is treated as important, the mind slowly turns into a machine that manufactures stress. Over time, that constant stream of mental activity becomes exhausting. Not just workload, mental overload. The brain keeps replaying situations long after they're over, analyzing conversations and predicting problems that may never occur. It revisits mistakes that can't be changed. Each thought may seem small on its own, yet when the mind follows every one of them, mental energy is steadily drained throughout the day. And here's the key point. The problem isn't that the brain produces thoughts. The problem is assuming every thought deserves attention. Once that assumption changes, the relationship you have with your own mind begins to change as well. And that shift is where burnout starts to lose its grip. Consider what happens inside your mind throughout the day. Thoughts appear continuously. Some are practical, some are random, some are completely irrelevant to what you're doing in that moment. Most people treat those thoughts as instructions. A thought appears, and the mind immediately begins to react to it. A worry appears. The mind starts analyzing it. A memory appears. The mind starts replaying it. A prediction appears. The mind begins building a scenario around it. This reaction happens so quickly that most people never even notice it. They assume the thought deserves attention simply because it appeared. Yet a thought is only a mental event. It is not automatically useful. It is not automatically true. And it doesn't automatically require a response. Once you begin seeing thoughts this way, something important changes. Instead of chasing every thought that appears, you begin noticing them. And that small shift creates space between you and the constant activity of your mind. That space is where mental clarity begins. Because once you stop reacting automatically, a new possibility appears. You can observe your thoughts instead of being carried by them. And that realization leads to the next important shift. Most people go through life holding an assumption they have never questioned. They assume their thoughts represent who they are. A thought appears and it immediately feels personal. Of course, it's in your head, right? A critical thought appears and they assume something must be wrong with them. A fearful thought appears and they assume the situation must be dangerous. A doubtful thought appears and they assume their ability is limited. Yet thoughts are simply events occurring in the mind. They arise, linger for a moment, and then disappear. Once people begin seeing thoughts this way, something important happens. Instead of reacting automatically, they start noticing the thought itself. This is a thought, not a command, not a fact, simply a thought appearing in the mind. That small shift changes the relationship you have with your own thinking. Instead of being pulled in every direction by each thought that appears, you begin observing them. Because when you're able to observe your thoughts, you gain the ability to choose which ones or which one deserves your attention. Here's a simple 3-step practice you could begin using right away. Step 1, notice the thought. Most reactions happen automatically. A thought appears and the mind immediately follows it. The first step is simply noticing when a thought enters your awareness. Instead of reacting to it, you pause long enough to recognize what just happened. A thought appeared. The moment of awareness interrupts the automatic chain reaction that normally follows. Now you're no longer being pulled along by the thought. You're seeing it. Step 2, label the thought. Once you notice the thought, give it a simple label, not a long analysis, just a quick description. This is a worry thought. This is a fear thought. This is a distraction. This is a comfort thought. Labeling a thought separates you from it. Instead of getting pulled into the story the mind is creating, you recognize the pattern behind it. The thought becomes easier to see clearly. And once you can see it clearly, you gain the ability to decide what to do next. Step 3, choose your attention. Attention is what gives thoughts their power. The more attention a thought receives, the more influence it has over your mood and behavior. So, after noticing and labeling the thought, you ask a simple question. Does this thought help me move forward right now? If the answer is yes, it deserves your attention. If the answer is no, you allow it to pass without feeding it more mental energy. You are not suppressing the thought. You are simply choosing not to follow it. And that choice becomes easier with practice. Over time, this ability strengthens. Instead of reacting automatically, you become more deliberate about where your attention goes. And that shift gradually reduces the mental noise that leads to exhaustion. Here's a simple real-world example. Imagine you're working on an important project. Everything is moving along normally when a thought appears. What if this doesn't work? For many people, that single thought quickly turns into a chain reaction. The mind begins replaying possible problems. What if the client doesn't like it? What if I overlook something important? What if this turns into failure? Within a few moments, the original task is forgotten. The mind is now focused on a problem that may not even exist. Now, consider the same moment using the approach we just discussed. The thought appears. What if it doesn't work? Instead of following the thought, immediately you notice it. A worry thought has appeared. You recognize the pattern and label it. Then you ask the simple question. Does this thought help me move the project forward right now? If the answer is no, you return your attention to the task in front of you. The thought may still exist in the background. That's normal. But the difference is that it no longer controls your focus. And that small shift prevents a 10-minute spiral of unnecessary stress. When you practice this occasionally, the difference feels minor. But when it happens dozens of times throughout a day on purpose, it protects a tremendous amount of mental energy. Here's a key insight that changes how people relate to their own mind. You don't control which thoughts appear. The brain produces them automatically. Yet you do control something far more important. You control where your attention goes. That single choice determines how much influence a thought has over you. If every thought receives attention, the mind becomes noisy, reactive, and exhausting. When attention becomes intentional, something different happens. The mind begins to settle, focus improves, and the constant background tension that many people carry starts to fade. But the mind is no longer chasing every thought that appears. Instead, attention becomes selective. And that simple shift changes the role thoughts play in your life. They stop acting like commands, and they become information that you can choose to engage with or ignore. Learning to observe your thoughts doesn't eliminate life's challenges. Deadlines still exist. Difficult conversations still happen. Uncertainty still appears from time to time. What changes is the amount of unnecessary suffering surrounding those moments. Many people carry a constant background tension throughout the day. Their mind keeps revisiting problems that have already passed, rehearsing conversations, and predicting outcomes that may never occur. Over time, that constant mental activity becomes exhausting. When you begin observing your own thoughts, instead of reacting to them automatically, something subtle begins to change. The mind becomes quieter, not silent, just less chaotic. You begin spending more energy on what is actually happening in front of you instead of the endless commentary inside your head. That shift alone can dramatically reduce the mental fatigue many people associate with burnout. Because burnout is not always the result of too much work. Often, it's the result of too much mental friction. When every thought demands attention, the mind never rests. When attention becomes selective, the mind can begin to recover. And the more consistently you practice this shift, the more natural it becomes. Thoughts are still going to appear. They simply no longer control the direction of your attention. Understanding how to observe your thoughts is a powerful skill. It gives you distance from the constant stream of mental noise that drains energy throughout the day. And once that distance appears, something important happens. You begin responding to situations more intentionally instead of reacting automatically. That shift alone can dramatically reduce the mental friction that contributes to burnout. But there's another factor that quietly fuels burnout for many people, and most don't recognize it until they are already exhausted. Modern self-improvement culture often encourages people to constantly optimize every part of their lives. More productivity, more habits, more goals, more systems. It sounds helpful. Yet in many cases, it creates the exact pressure people are trying to escape. In the next video, I break down the hidden problem inside modern self-improvement culture and why chasing endless productivity can actually push people closer to burnout instead of further away from it. Click on the video on your screen to watch that next. I'll see you there.